Hey YouTube, VidHead85 here. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode here. I'm just going to talk about a couple of things, and one of them is the fact that I can't stand the Duggars. But even worse, I can't stand the ideology behind the Duggars. Let me tell you, so I am a person, the Constitution was not written for me. The Constitution was not written for me. Period, dot, end of story. When the Constitution was written, my ancestors were in chains while they had the nerve to say that all men are created equal. Not even women. Women couldn't even vote yet. Only land-holding men could vote. But I want to talk about the danger of religious fundamentalism and the people that I just can't stand that push that religious fundamentalism, especially Mark Driscoll. Now, Mark Driscoll and Jim Bob Duggar are two very different kinds of people. Although Jim Duggar does it subtly. The thing is, Jim Bob looks really, he has this really calm thing about him where even though he does it quietly. He really doesn't push or do it aggressively. Mark Driscoll, at least if I don't like the fucker, because he is someone who reminds me of a bully that peaked in high school and and his entire catalog is high school. And then I also want to talk a little bit about Paula Morgan and Girl Defined, and I want to thank the AntiBot and Skeptic, the AntiBot and Genetically Modified Skeptic, because they did a show or a video about hanging out with Bethany and Dave. So Bethany of Girl Defined and her husband Dave. And I think that what was interesting about it was a couple of things. How they view deconstruction. Deconstruction isn't just leaving the faith. Some people don't even leave the faith. That's okay. Some people do leave the faith, and I personally endorse that one. However, every deconstruction journey is their own. And for me, I ended up leaving the faith, but I still have some greater spiritually general ideas that I still cling to. However, I would say more like I would probably say more spiritual. I don't think, as far as being an atheist, I would probably say that much quicker, because at least people know what an atheist is. And personally, I'm like, listen, in this case, I'm a skeptic. If you're going to tell me God is real, I want proof, and then I want that proof to also apply to other God that you're talking about. If you can't prove to me that any God exists the first time and then try to tell me that another God exists, you haven't proven anything. But jumping into the fundamentalism part here, that I really let me jump back to the AntiBot and Genetically Modified Skeptic. If you do not follow either of their channels, please do. They are wonderful content creators, and they also have a very humanistic view of the people that they're talking about. Now, me personally, I may not be that noble. If I saw Mark Driscoll choking on a biscuit, I would probably hand him another one and say, die faster. I don't care. But when they talked about Paul and Morgan with Bethany and Dave, it was an eye-opening video. And what I want to talk about is how Dave isn't as fundamentalist as Girl Defined or Bethany and Paul and Morgan. And it was interesting kind of seeing how Paul and David were quite different, and about how Dave could see nuance. And even though Paul and Morgan aren't really quite there, and then sometimes the ladies of Girl Defined were really there with certain things, or they're almost there, but because of their worldview kind of gating them and pulling them back, they just didn't seem to follow it to a conclusion, at least that it should go to, in my view. So, about Paul and Morgan and Girl Defined, they mentioned that they get a lot of hate. And they're really not the most influential out there. I think that they probably started getting a lot of, maybe a hypothesis, they started getting more hate after the Shiny Happy People documentary. When Fundy Fridays said, and I can see this being a concern, that some younger evangelicals are pushing the same thing but to a younger audience and making it seem like it's hip and cool. And I get it, because that is another part of the fundamentalism thing that is very concerning, that even though young people are even though there are a lot of young people leaving, a lot of young people stay, and they look to these channels to for wisdom and advice and whatever, even though the advice isn't all that great or coming from a place of knowledge. So they did say something interesting about, why don't we go after these big people? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. Let's take somebody big down. Because if anything, like, one, we all know that there's a lot of spiritual abuse happening. Let's just call it what it is. It's spiritual abuse. Let's also call the fact that who is that hate preacher in Arizona? I'll put a picture of him here. That someone who could have been my father-in-law watches and posts on his page. Those are the kinds of people that need to be brought down and ridiculed and mocked online, as far as I'm concerned. Now, does it? Yeah, you know what? It makes me feel better. It does. I don't care. Like, conservatism is such a cancer in this country that I don't really see, like, it's got white supremacy, it's got religious fundamentalism behind it, and I'm just not for it. I can't. My life is always political. I'm a gay black man living in America, and before I put my foot to the ground, waking up, I've already offended conservatives 10 times. So that was a little bit of that. I guess I'm just diarrheaing all of this, but I want to come back to Jim Bob Duggar here. And I want to talk about people like him. People who are in a place of power and use religion in order to control, in order to pretty much, like, the IBLP and other conservative cults make men the leaders, unquestionable leaders, and they also have authority without accountability, and that is abusive. That is the part that I hate. Also, women are not allowed to leave the house until they're married, or if they aren't married, they literally have to go to extreme measures in order to leave. The position of women are, you're a broodmare. Pop out some babies. Like, there is no ability for education, because a lot of women who are in these kinds of cults only have, like, certain little jobs that pertain to domestic activity or something. I can't stand that, because we have a lot of untapped potential that is not used because somebody decided to base something on a 2,000-year-old book and follow it heavily, and that's the only book that we need on anything. How many courses would be shit if they only counted on one 2,000-year-old book? What would we be believing medically if that happened? So anyway, those are my thoughts. You have a nice day. If you stayed all the way, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I'll be getting some child-free content out again, because I found something that reinforced my child-freeness. And I'll see you soon.